The wind howled through the barren trees, carrying with it the whispers of the past. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the rugged landscape. Deep within the heart of the Carpathian Mountains lay a village forgotten by time, a place where no traveler dared to tread.
Its name had long been lost to history, but the locals referred to it only as the Cursed Village. The village was isolated, cut off from the world.
Village was isolated, cut off from the world by dense forests and treacherous cliffs. Its existence was known to few, and those who knew of it spoke only in hushed tones, for they believed that even uttering its name would bring misfortune. Stories of the cursed village had been passed down through generations, tales of strange happenings, dark rituals, and the restless spirits of the damned. It was a cold autumn night when a small group of scholars set out to uncover the truth behind the village's dark reputation. Led by Professor Henry Carlyle, a man driven by an insatiable curiosity for the unknown, the group consisted of 4 members: Emily, a historian with a keen interest in folklore; Marcus, a linguist fluent in ancient dialects; Sarah, an archaeologist experienced in uncovering buried secrets; and James, a photographer eager to capture the mysteries they would uncover. Their journey had begun in the nearby town of Bran, where they had been warned by the locals to turn back, but they were determined. Henry had come across a rare manuscript in an old library that hinted at a hidden village, a place cursed by a sin too great to be named. The manuscript contained fragmented accounts of a place where the sun never shone, and the villagers had long since abandoned their mortal forms. Driven by the desire to make a groundbreaking discovery, they ignored the warnings and pressed on. The path to the village was treacherous. The dense fog rolled in, obscuring their vision as they made their way through the twisted trees and uneven ground. The air was thick with a strange, metallic scent, and the sounds of the forest seemed to grow more distant, as if the very land itself was holding its breath. After what felt like hours of trudging through the dense undergrowth, they finally arrived at the outskirts of the village. The sight that greeted them was unsettling. The village was shrouded in a thick mist, its outline barely visible in the moonlight. The houses were old and crumbling, their roofs sagging and walls covered in ivy. There were no signs of life, no sounds except for the wind that seemed to wail like a mournful cry. The air was colder here, colder than it had been in the forest, and a chill ran down their spines. They entered cautiously, their footsteps echoing on the cobblestone streets. The village seemed deserted, yet there was a strange sense of being watched. Emily noticed old runes carved into the stone walls of the buildings, symbols she couldn't immediately decipher. Marcus, intrigued, began to document them, his fingers tracing the ancient markings. Henry led them to the village square, where a large, dilapidated church stood, its spire leaning precariously to one side. "This must be the center of the curse," he muttered, his voice barely a whisper. The church door creaked open with a loud groan, and a cold draft greeted them as they stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of decay was overwhelming. Inside, they found a large wooden altar, covered in dark stains that looked suspiciously like dried blood. Strange objects were strewn about, dolls made of straw with their eyes gouged out, bones arranged in peculiar patterns, and melted candles that had long since burned out. Emily's heart raced as she examined the altar. "These symbols," she murmured, pointing to more carvings in the wood, "they're not just runes, they're warnings." As they continued to explore the church, James began to take photographs, his camera's flash briefly illuminating the darkness. Each time the light flared, shadows seemed to move, flickering just out of sight. Suddenly, he felt a cold hand brush against his cheek. He turned, but there was no one there. Did anyone else feel that?" he asked, his voice trembling. "No," Sarah replied, her eyes narrowing, "but I don't think we're alone here." A sudden noise echoed through the church, a faint, guttural whisper that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. The group froze, listening intently. The whisper grew louder, a chorus of voices speaking in a language none of them could understand. Panic began to set in, and Henry, ever the skeptic, tried to calm the group. "It's just the wind," he insisted, though his voice betrayed his own fear. Marcus, however, was not convinced. He was staring at the altar, his eyes wide with horror. These are names," he stammered, pointing at the carvings on the altar. Names of the villagers, but they're crossed out, as if they were erased from existence. Suddenly, the church door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and the air became suffocatingly thick. The temperature dropped sharply, and their breaths became visible in the freezing air. Henry moved to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. "We're trapped," he said, panic creeping into his voice. Then, the shadows began to move in earnest. Dark figures emerged from the corners of the church, their forms distorted and featureless, their eyes glowing a sickly green. They moved silently, gliding across the floor like mist. One by one, they approached the group, their cold, bony hands reaching out. Emily screamed as one of the figures touched her, a coldness seeping into her very soul. She felt as though something was being pulled from her, a part of herself she could never reclaim. "We need to leave," she cried, but the door remained firmly shut. Sarah grabbed a large wooden cross from the wall, wielding it like a weapon. "Stay back," she shouted, but the figures continued to advance, unfazed by the symbol. One of them lunged at her, and she swung the cross with all her might. It passed right through the figure, and she stumbled backward, her eyes wide with terror. Marcus, frantically flipping through his notes, realized the gravity of their mistake. "We shouldn't have come here. This place is a trap. They were cursed to remain, and now they want us to join them." James was taking pictures frantically, hoping to capture evidence, but with each flash, the figures seemed to grow more numerous, their forms becoming more distinct, more human-like, yet terrifyingly deformed. Their mouths moved, but no sound came out, save for that persistent whisper, now growing louder and more frenzied. Henry, desperate, grabbed a candle from the altar and lit it with trembling hands. "We need to find a way out," he muttered. The light from the candle flickered, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance on the walls. But then, to their horror, they realized the shadows were moving independently of the flame. The whispers reached a fever pitch, and the figures lunged forward. The candle flame was snuffed out by an unseen force, plunging them into total darkness. Panic set in, and they scrambled to find the door, clawing at the wood, desperate to escape. Suddenly, there was a loud crack, and the door burst open, flooding the church with moonlight. They didn't hesitate, they ran. They ran through the village, their breaths ragged, their hearts pounding in their chests. The whispers continued, carried on the wind, chasing them like a pack of wolves. They reached the edge of the forest, and as they crossed the threshold, the whispers abruptly stopped. The village, now just a shadowy outline in the distance, seemed to shrink away, swallowed by the mist. Gasping for breath, they collapsed on the forest floor, their bodies trembling, their minds reeling. What was that?" Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. Henry, his face pale and his hands shaking, looked back at the village. "We should never have come here," he said. "Some secrets are meant to remain buried, and some places are cursed for a reason." They returned to the town of Bran the next morning, shaken and scarred by their ordeal. They spoke little of what they had experienced, and when they did, their words were met with silence and knowing glances. The villagers simply nodded, as if they had heard it all before. Over time, each member of the group was haunted by what they had seen. Strange occurrences followed them, whispers in the night, shadows that seemed to move on their own, and a chilling sense that they were never truly alone. One by one, they disappeared, leaving behind only their notes and photographs, which became the stuff of local legend. And so, the cursed village remained, hidden deep within the mountains, waiting for the next curious souls to stumble upon its dark secret, a place where the sun never shone, and the restless spirits of the damned wandered in search of peace they would never find.